Joining us today for our webcast, Kellogg's recipe for winning the digital shelf. My name is Rob Lunder from the Edge by Ascential Marketing Department. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers, Richard Gibbons, Global Ecommerce Customer Development Director at Kellogg's, and my colleague Rob Nowell, Regional Marketing Director at Edge. Hi, Richard and Rob. Can you guys hear me okay today?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Richard Gibbons joined the Kellogg company in June 2010 and has held various e-commerce positions to date, such as the UK Insight, UK Account, and European Regional Lead roles. Since 2016, Richard has held the position of e-commerce Customer Development Director, focusing on the Latin American and Asian Pacific markets, while also continuing to work with some of our UK and US customers. In his current role, Richard has co-developed the company e-commerce go-to-market global strategy. Robert Nowell is responsible for defining and executing Edge's marketing strategy at a regional level from the Americas to Europe to APAC. Robert has created global campaigns and strategies for leading tech brands, including Oracle, Dell, and Google. A few housekeeping items before we begin today. All participants will be on mute for this call. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box located on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll do our very best at the end of the presentation to answer as many questions as time allows. And if we're unable to answer the questions live today, we will make sure to get back to you with our recommended responses. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to Rob, who will share some background on Edge by Ascential and kick off today's presentation. Rob, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Nowell, and welcome to our joint webcast with Kellogg's on the practicalities of creating the perfect digital shelf globally. It's fair to say if you've been to any e-commerce conference over the last 5 years, you'll have heard the term the basics and how to get the basics right about 1,000 times. And of course, the basics are incredibly important, and in theory, they may indeed seem quite basic. Today, we do not want to use the term the basics, as actually the practicality of rolling these out globally and what that means in terms of logistics, market nuances, education, stakeholder buy-in, and so on is really quite complex. So just a quick intro here for those of you who are not familiar with Edge. We are the product of 4 legacy companies: Brandview, Clavis, One Click Retail, and Planet Retail Net Group. We have joined our forces and expertise to create 5 clear offerings within Edge. First of all is market share, which is our unrivaled Amazon market share data and calculations, and how they help you measure category share, identify sales trends, analyze category strengths and weaknesses, and benchmark against your competitors. Then we have Retail Insight, designed to help you uncover the market strategies you need to implement in order to grow now and evolve for the future. Then Digital Shelf. Not sure what happened with the audio there. Digital Shelf, which provides actionable e-commerce insights that show the steps you need to take to optimize products online, accelerate growth, and ultimately increase sales. Also have Price and Promo, which delivers real-time data and alerts that give you strategic and tactical insight to drive margins, profitability, and sales. Finally is our executive education experts that help global brands, retailers, and retail tech firms solve business challenges with a range of customer advisory services. We apply our knowledge, data, and expertise to identify and prioritize the strategies that will enable companies to win in retail. So that's enough of an intro, and really we want to get into the meat of today's presentation. So I'm about to hand over to Richard as he talks us through some of the practical and necessary steps that we need to address in order to gain consistency in e-commerce at a global scale, using his experiences from Kellogg's and how they have navigated an ever more e-commerce driven marketplace. First of all, we want to look at international nuances and how we need to adapt and evolve in order to best serve each market. We all know there is not a one-size-fits-all model, so Richard, over to you to talk us through some of the fundamental challenges with international scale.
Hello, Richard. Can you hear us okay?
Hello. Hello.
Yep. Richard, yep.
Yeah, am I on?
Yep. Robert just transitioned to you, so
Right,
you can go
okay.
ahead and walk us through.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know how that muted there. So thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to those outside of the UK. As Rob teed up nicely, I'm going to talk you through, I guess, the challenges internationally of measuring the digital shelf and the nuances market by market that make that quite difficult, to be honest. And also what it means in terms of arriving at the right consistency of execution across the digital shelf. And again, some of the regional and local challenges that we face in terms of arriving at that consistent MVP market to market. So I'm going to talk you through the main challenges. I'm going to talk you through regional and market dynamics. I'm going to talk about what it means internally in terms of people and education. I'm going to talk through how to get to a consistent measurement, and then we're going to touch on some scorecarding that we've recently partnered with a key global retailer on, and I'm also going to refer to some content pieces as well. Next slide, please. So I guess the first challenge that we faced in terms of having a consistent and perfect digital shelf present globally is the different e-commerce grocery models that we face into market by market. And also within the market, there are different models which have different executional possibilities and also restrictions. So if we think of a model, a market like the UK and the models that are here and available for us to execute our products and our brands across, we find that within the B2C sector of the market, there are limitations in a market like the UK. So we don't necessarily have the same possibilities to list lifestyle imagery. We are restricted on a number of images that we have to really convey our brand proposition and really bring to life our food. That is actually even more challenging when we start to focus on new areas of the e-commerce grocery market, such as B2B. A lot of the B2B retailers have kind of been in the analog legacy world, and they're fast moving into the digital environment and the e-commerce landscape. But the platforms that they're using to do that are incredibly restrictive. So sometimes actually having an image representing our product is often quite a challenge on some of these platforms. And that is the number one way in which shoppers and customers navigate these platforms. So in terms of having a perfect digital shelf across models, it can sometimes vary within an actual market as well as vary country by country globally. Also, when we compare markets, if we think of a market like the US versus the rest of the world, we sometimes run into issues where we have a greater access to data in a market like the US versus a market like the UK. I'll use that example again. And the reason for that is that the platforms have been developed in a very different way. If we think about the grocery platforms that we have here in the UK, they have been specifically developed for grocery shopping, whereas the platforms in the US that are selling groceries actually weren't. They were developed for general merchandise products. They were developed for single item, high ticket shopping, and therefore there are many more possibilities in the digital shelf to load up enhanced content, to load up number of images, and to really augment the product description to enable search functionality and to also affect organic search rankings. So we often find that the data, the granularity of the data in a market like the US, and the possibilities within the platforms are much greater than they are in the rest of the world. So to get that consistency in what the perfect digital shelf looks like is very, very challenging. The third, I guess, market regional dynamic that we're facing into is a change of shopper behavior. I guess the number one trend that we're looking at across the globe is the move into, I guess, on-demand shopping. So shoppers expecting to be able to receive food items within an hour. And there are a number of platforms, a highly fragmented marketplace that exists across the world. So sometimes we will have a branded presence on some of these marketplaces and not know too much about it. It may be fulfilled by a distributor. So we've got very little visibility to how our brands are appearing on those marketplaces and very little control over the content, which makes measurement pretty difficult, if not impossible in some cases. Next slide, please. A real good example of what we would class as a more mature e-commerce market that is incredibly difficult to measure is the market of France. And the reason for that is the model that exists over there. You may be, obviously, well, the majority of you will be familiar with the click and collect model. Over in France, it's referred to as Drive. And it is the same principle. It is shoppers placing an order online and going to collect it. However, the model is slightly different, as the way in which the orders are fulfilled is from a mini warehouse. So a retailer like Leclerc, for example, that has over 1,000 Drive locations throughout France, operates pretty close to that number in terms of mini warehouses that fulfill shoppers' orders ready for that collection. And what that means is that the way they've structured the front end operation to support that and to support their presence throughout the market is that they have built pretty much a dedicated website for each of those locations. The problem as well is that the ownership model is very much a local ownership model. So there will be store owners of each of those Drive locations, and those store owners, they don't necessarily have to follow centrally agreed promotional activity. They don't have to follow centrally agreed ranging agreements, but they will follow it to an extent, but they're not completely compliant. So you will often see variances with your range from one Drive location to the other, variances in what promotions are activated in one Drive location to another. So it's highly fragmented. There are literally thousands of Drive websites within potentially one, two retailers within the same market, which makes measuring the digital shelf compliance almost impossible. So obviously we partner with Edge and we've partnered with them globally. But the point here on France is that actually we didn't go forward with the Edge solution in France. We actually deployed a local solution who could tackle this highly fragmented market much better than some of the global providers. So I guess the point here is really getting into the understanding of the operating model within key markets, working closely with your regional teams to understand exactly what the capability is by market, capability is by platform, and then aligning on exactly what is possible to measure and what is not. And so on this occasion, what's been really important for us is to find a provider that can have a consistent read across the entire country, but also find a provider that can align on metrics to our global provider, which is Edge. So that's a real, I guess, interesting market for us, which makes consistency and measurement quite challenging. But we feel as though we've arrived at the right solution. Next slide, please. So as I just touched on there, the French model, the Drive model, does present some challenges. I'm now going to touch on some other global e-commerce models that also, I guess there's opportunity and there's also barriers to really building and perfecting the perfect digital shelf. I'll do this in two parts really. Over to the left-hand side, so I talked about the challenges of France already, but in terms of actually platform capabilities, they're in a similar place to the UK, where these platforms, they're built for grocery shopping, which means that there isn't as many possibilities when it comes to enhanced content, rich branded content, video. Images are restricted to maybe one or two. That is the reality of those platforms. So I guess when we're thinking of our minimum viable product of digital shelf capability, we tend to find that on these kind of grocery built platforms over to the left-hand side. Over to the right-hand side, there's much more possibility for us. I touched on the general merchandise nature of the platforms over in the US, which means we can have much more images attached to a product. We can have enhanced content. We can play around with descriptions and load keywords into those descriptions much more than we can to the countries over to the left-hand side. And a further interesting dynamic, and if you think of the spectrum of possibilities of content, where to the, I guess, the limited side of the spectrum is the guys on the left-hand side, but all the way far out right would be a market like China, which is a heavily kind of marketplace-orientated market, where a brand like Kellogg's, yes, will be listed on that platform, but will 9 times out of 10, where we're going to get the bulk of our traffic is through our own branded store, which is listed on platforms. In this example, is Yihaodian, but in the current day, it's more likely to be a JD.com or a Tmall. What's really great from our point of view as a branded business is that we have much more control over the content here. So we have much more control over the branded content. We have much more control over the actual shelf itself in terms of imagery, description, basic content, enhanced content, rich media, the full picture really. And that's important for us because our category penetration is much lower in these emerging markets. And so we really need our branded assets to bring our products to life, to stand out on the digital shelf, and to ultimately influence shoppers to put our products into baskets. So I guess from a branded point of view, that's where we would like to be across the globe. But the reality from a shopper point of view, because we are part of a basket, so it is basket building behavior that we want to enable. We don't want to interrupt that too much. We want to enable shoppers to be able to build baskets. I guess the ideal scenario is somewhere in between the Chinese model and the UK model. Next slide, please. So to arrive at the perfect digital shelf, obviously these things don't just happen, and we have to build capability internally. We have to build virtual teams, and we have to build a structure around that. And for me, the 4 departments that are kind of pulled out here are really key to doing that, because without alignment to achieving the perfect digital shelf, these departments can actually make some detrimental changes to that, which really restricts and actually can waste a lot of money sometimes as well. So if I think about commercial sales, when a new product's listed, it is the role and responsibility of the commercial sales department to ensure that that product is listed with the correct details. We've had examples in the past, and we've had to build processes internally to avoid this from happening. But it can be the case that a major retailer will have a new line form for a new product, and that new line form will only allow certain characters. So whoever is processing that new line form will sometimes abbreviate key bits of information that really impact on search. They may take out our branded name. They may take out a keyword such as cereal or crisps or something like that would really impact the presence of that new product on the digital shelf. So they've got a real critical role to play in that initial setup of new products and products that are added to the range. The next department that's really key to arriving at the perfect digital shelf, of course, is brand marketing. So we need the absolute latest assets. We need to ensure that we have content that is telling the story, that is clearly identifying the features and the benefits of each of the individual SKUs to the shopper. We know more and more shoppers are going to product pages to make decisions, and those decisions aren't just happening for purchase online, they're also happening for purchase offline. So it's an incredibly important role to play from the brand marketing team. Customer marketing team, probably to a lesser degree, also have a role to play. If there is a certain promotional SKU that is going into account, we need to make sure that is fully set up with the right packaging, the right imagery of the packaging, so that clearly stands out, so the shopper understands what the point of difference is for that SKU, what is unique about it, so it clearly stands out on the digital shelf. And then finally, category management also have a key role to play in terms of perfecting a digital shelf. This goes back to that wastage point I made. So it can happen that everything is done internally across those 3 departments and other departments to ensure the product description is correct on the new line form, to ensure that the branded content is built to support the SKU, to ensure that there's any promotional information that's built into that content. But we've had examples where a new product has gone into a retailer, but it hasn't met the thresholds to pull through online. So let's say retailer X requires a product to be distributed in 300 stores nationally. the category management team may have agreed for that product to be listed in 298, and by virtue that means that that product is not going to pull through to that retailer's e-commerce platform. So we've gone through all that process, invested that money in the content, but it's not available there for the shopper to buy, so it's a waste of process. So it's very key that those departments are lined up to truly execute the perfect digital shelf. Next slide, please. So I touched a little bit on the departments that are key to really delivering this, and I think there's a number of I guess softer capabilities that are required internally, and a lot of it comes down to education. So mistakes are made because people don't know any better. So there's a real key role to play for the e-commerce experts within the organisation to really define that process, to really take people on a journey with them within e-commerce. E-commerce cannot operate in a silo, particularly with something like digital shelf execution, which is so important to both the online and the offline business. So it's very, very important that you have the structure in place. You identify that virtual team, as I've demonstrated with those 4 departments on the previous slide, but also identify the key stakeholders to ensure that they are accountable for perfecting the digital shelf. And so these things I think the process will be defined and people will live and breathe it. But also it's not just a case of having people identified and that virtual team working in sync. There does have to be an investment infrastructure behind that. There is third-party support that is sometimes needed to optimize mobile imagery, for example. That's not something that we always do in-house. We do need to identify the right partners, and we need to make sure that's budgeted for, so that all of our products have a consistent look and feel. It's not just a case of having limited investment, meaning that you can only optimize 50% of your range. It's important that we strive for that consistency on a digital shelf, which is only ever one facing, is much more of a level playing field. So from a branded business like ours, it's very, very important that we have that consistent look and feel, so that aids our standout on that digital shelf. Next slide, please. So just touching on consistency and measurement, obviously Edge helps us with a lot of this. And what's been really important for us is to identify a global partner. We do want to be measuring things in as consistently as possible. We do want to have a clear view of what good looks like. So our first step was identifying that global partner. Where possible, of course, there are some markets where it's not, but it is absolutely critical that in those markets where it's not possible to have one global partner across everyone, it is important that you are measuring the KPIs in the same way. So you are measuring the same keywords for search, etc. So that's been the very crucial first step. The next step, which I think is something that we've been quite active in, that I'm not sure the rest of the trade is necessarily, is to align that global partner with key retail partners. So understand exactly how they're measuring digital shelf compliance, how they're measuring what their view is of the perfect digital shelf, understand what their KPIs are, and do those KPIs marry up? And also back to that point on search. So if we're measuring search presence against a number of keywords, how universal are those keywords? Are we factoring in retail level nuances, which may be regionally led? Are we factoring those into how we're measuring our digital shelf presence across search ranking? A true enabler of consistency and measurement is accountability. So it's all well and good measuring our digital shelf presence and feeding back to local teams, but if people aren't accountable for it, then things don't always change to address any areas where you may not be performing where you need to be in terms of your industry benchmarks. So the way in which we would like to approach that is to ensure that the key stakeholders across all of the virtual team are truly accountable for this. The digital shelf is on people's PDPs, and because it's an integral part of brand health, as I've touched on, the benefits both from an online point of view, but also the impact on shoppers who are researching products online and purchasing offline. Next slide, please. And just to kind of reiterate a few points I've made on content, content is an absolute critical point. I'm talking branded content here of the perfect digital shelf. We do have to work within the restrictions from platform to platform, but having that minimal viable product is absolutely critical, ensuring that the features and benefits are clearly communicated product to product. As we know, 24% of shoppers are making decisions using these product pages, which is a huge step on from when we first measured this. We also know that about a quarter of our offline business is affected by our presence on the digital shelf. So it's absolutely critical that content is correct. And I think as well, something that we've done recently, and we'll see on the next slide in a sec, is don't be afraid to steal with pride. Do audit your sites globally. And if there's somebody within your category who's doing a better job with some element of digital shelf content, don't be afraid to adopt it internally. I think we can all force each other to perfect the digital shelf. I think we can all force the envelope really with the quality of content that we see from platform to platform, and that's just going to mean a better experience for shoppers, which ultimately is going to drive higher basket spend, which means we're all going to be fishing from a bigger pond. So don't be afraid to really have your own, I guess, external benchmarks of what good looks like, and adapt some of that process and some of that content style. Next slide, please. A good example of this is Kind. This is a brand that sits within our, I guess, healthy snacking category. It's not the biggest brand, but certainly punches above its weight in the e-commerce environment, particularly on Amazon in the US. And when we first pulled this deck together a while ago, this was pretty close to a gold standard. So fantastic product description, great number of images, some great basic and enhanced content further kind of below the fold that you can't see on the screen. But for me, it just goes to show how fast the quality of content moves, because I can straight away see some things that they could do better. The image, for example, isn't mobile optimized. The first couple of bullets aren't truly optimized either. So it just goes to show that there is momentum here in truly optimizing the digital shelf. And I think supplier from supplier are pushing each other. And I think over time we are defining the new set of rules of what good looks like. And I talked about stealing with pride, and to be really open and honest with you, I'll give you a UK example. We're now into the third iteration of our mobile hero imagery, and iteration 2 was a step on from iteration 1, of course. But then we're looking at the landscape just before the holidays, and we saw one of our competitors, for me, just had a much cleaner image, much simpler to follow in terms of brand, in terms of size of product, in terms of key message. And we looked at ours and thought, you know what, they're doing a better job. And so we actually adopted some of their practice into iteration 3, which will be rolling out in the next couple of weeks. So that's an example of where we thought we had the answers, we thought we were doing a good job, but the market had moved on again. And so by auditing the sites, we learnt those lessons and built those insights really into our own process. And we feel as though we've got an even better result now, and we're excited for that to roll out across the trade. Okay, Rob, I think it's over to you now.
Thanks, Rich. So as we've just covered there, I think it is absolutely crucial and vital to ensure consistency and compliance in our content. And as Rich sort of touched on there, there's everything in terms of consistency and measurement. But how do we look at that, in terms of different regions, different retailers, different brands, and how do we quickly identify if we are struggling with a particular retailer or a specific region, or how can we even measure if the changes that we are implementing yesterday are having a clear and positive effect today? So to help answer some of these questions, Edge developed the scorecard. Now, the scorecard, it's worth noting, was actually developed with some of our key manufacturing clients, such as the likes of Kellogg, to get their view in terms of, what is it that they would need to know and track over time, and what are those key metrics? So the scorecard really provides a clear, visual top-line overview of your e-commerce performance in key areas aligned to your specific business targets. Essentially, it aggregates a huge volume of data into a simplified, easy-to-understand format, which enables you to deliver tailored insights to all levels of the business, from C-level to regional, local teams, to essentially create a more streamlined e-commerce flow. So how does it work? So basically, the scorecard allows you to create bespoke targets in each key area. So, for example, you might be looking for a minimum of 80% content accuracy in retailers, or a minimum of 3.5 stars for review ratings. And in this example, which I'd like to highlight, is absolutely just illustrative dummy data. We can see that reviews are not ideal in both Tesco and Sainsbury's, and clearly, Kellogg or whoever would need to take action here to address these issues, particularly if it pertains to a recent NPD. Again, if we're seeing that we only have a 30% share of the top 20 products in our category within Asda, then we need to rectify this, whether that's working with the retailer or looking at our key search terms. Action is clearly required. So basically, we can look at this top level, but we can drill all the way down in terms of the individual brand. We can look at the retailer and go all the way down to SKU level. So, I think we've gone through, in the previous slides, some of the challenges facing our businesses today. But we, of course, need to be cognizant that e-commerce is an ever-evolving beast, and the challenges we are overcoming today will soon be replaced with new challenges and opportunities tomorrow. So in this section, we dive into some of the future trends that will continue to drive and shape commerce. So as Rich touched on before, convenience, particularly in the UK and other emerging markets, is so hot right now. Companies are adapting and evolving to align to it, and I think that with some of the stats that we're going to go through here, we can really see that in order for us to be able to progress and to move forward, we need to align to those different consumer lifestyles. And it's not just the lifestyles that's driving it. Obviously, it's technology, it's global urbanization trends. So first of all, if we have a look here at this Amazon stat, Amazon's considered a plan to open as many as 3,000 Amazon Go stores by 2021. These futuristic shops are projected to generate somewhere in the ballpark of 4.5 billion sales per year. And one amazing stat that I actually read about last week was that Amazon's new cashless and cashierless stores bring in around 50% more revenue on average than typical convenience stores, according to recent estimates. And as I said, they're one of the main drivers really behind this demand for convenience is urbanization. And our recent data from the Retail Insights division of Edge suggests that global urbanization rates will rise from 55 to 58%, which doesn't sound all that massive, and that's by 2023. But that will create 481 million new urban dwellers. So it's further going to just drive this demand for proximity, conveniency, and essentially immediacy around the world. Now, I'm based in the UK, and one of the big disruptors that we're seeing, particularly in cities and highly populated areas, are players like Uber Eats and Deliveroo. And these brands are really reinventing the takeaway and delivery experience. And we know, working with lots of brands and manufacturers, they are becoming increasingly conscious of how they track and optimize for these exploding channels. For example, if you're let's say a fizzy drink manufacturer, you need to ensure content compliance. In all of these, breakthrough channels, you need to ensure that they're using your mobile optimized imagery, and how can you encourage, upsells and cross sells across the platform. And if you look at that stat there, in the UK, Deliveroo last year had 650% year-on-year growth, which is just absolutely unprecedented in that industry sort of 10 years ago. And finally, with online orders ever increasing, the need for click and collect points are growing simultaneously to help facilitate that demand. And companies need to certainly be aware from a logistics and fulfillment strategy perspective of how they can offer customers the easiest way to receive orders, or ultimately they may run the risk of a shopper selecting a different brand or retailer. So, what does this mean? Well, obviously, we can't say for certain what's going to happen in the future, but me and Rich sort of discussed, what some of these trends actually mean for brands. And one of the first things we looked at is next day delivery really still enough? Looking at the huge growth of Amazon now in mature markets and cities. And the fact that this is, for a while now been absolutely massive for general merchandise, does this suggest there could be room for more of a, national level 1 to 2 hour delivery service? And potentially in the UK, are there some retailers there that already have the infrastructure to look at this nationally? If you think about Tesco with Tesco Express and Co-op with stores all over the country and littered across densely populated areas, there could be the opportunity for, for some of those retailers to sort of turn the dial there and be able to capitalize on that from a FMCG or CPG perspective. And finally, just on this point, we're not suggesting at all that click and collect or home delivery will ever completely replace the traditional bricks and mortar experience. Sure, it might eat into some of the bricks and mortar share, but I ran a quick report just prior to this webinar, and the report on edible grocery this afternoon in terms of split was for the UK 5% online sales, and in store was 95%, and with the US it was 97 to 3 again in favor of in store. So obviously that is just edible grocery, not all of FMCG, if those numbers sounded somewhat shocking, but clearly there's still a huge place for bricks and mortar, but again just furthers the need for just showing that even as Rich said before, ensuring that your content is there and driving even in-store experiences. So now we're going to take a quick look at the opportunity from a global perspective. I think as we're all aware, given the audience on today, that China is just such a big player, and the numbers there only further that. And recently they've been strengthening their global foothold with the likes of JD looking at Big Basket, and also on the other side of the fence we have Walmart looking at various acquisitions and investments in companies like Rakuten, Jet, JD, Flipkart, and to me, all of this just points to global consolidation. And so what does that mean really in terms of a strategy from a global perspective? Well, there's a few stats here that I think are really quite pertinent when we look at how we expand and scale at a global rate. And I think with 1.4 billion set to join the middle class by 2020, and couple that with the stats we mentioned earlier about growing numbers in urban areas, e-commerce, online e-commerce convenience is only going to continue to boom. And how do we cater for this audience? And I'm sure that all major brands are really catering for that in MEDCs and some of the more mature markets, but it begs the question of with more people set to join the middle class, and various models in LEDCs becoming more online, e-commerce becoming more and more mature, it does beg the question of is our infrastructure and logistics and fulfillment strategy aligned to this rapid growth? We look at that bottom stat there, and India's projected 31% compound annual growth rate in e-commerce, and with that in mind, I think that it begs the question of are we all looking at that in terms of our infrastructure and our ability to serve these customers. I think clearly with Walmart looking at Flipkart and Alibaba at Big Basket, they must also see a real opportunity in India too. And then just that middle stat in terms of the Wrigley's piece. Well, I think that shows that when Wrigley's entered China some time ago, if you get into these markets at the right time and you're an early adopter and you have the right infrastructure and work with the retailers, then there's every reason that you can capitalize on regions like APAC, where I know a lot of companies are dedicating huge amounts of resource and investment at the minute. So I think that's all from myself in terms of future trends, and I will pass back to our host, Robert Lunder.
Thank you, Richard and Rob. Great insights. Before entering the Q&A portion of the program, we'd like to let everyone know that in addition to our virtual webcast, we also have an awesome schedule of in-person events and programs that we want to share with you going forward. Two exciting upcoming opportunities for those of you focused on accelerating your business are, first, we'd like to invite you to our Omnichannel Hackathon in Europe on May 8th in London. This is an exclusive full-day summit overflowing with amazing content focused on helping you win with top online and omnichannel retailers in Europe, including client case studies and the Hack Shop Masterclass sessions. The Hack Shops are assigned breakout topics led by e-commerce subject matter experts. Working in non-competitive peer groups, you will leave these sessions having made measurable improvements to your omnichannel strategy that can be implemented within your business. We're also excited to feature Richard as one of our brand presenters at this event. There are limited seats and early bird tickets are available now. We sold out twice in the fall, so these do go very quickly. You can either reach out to your Edge partners or register directly via our website, where it's listed under the events tab at ascentialedge.com. Second, for any of you focused more exclusively on Amazon, our next Amazon Hackathon Europe will take place the day before on May 7th in London. Similarly, this is an exclusive full-day masterclass summit for Amazon and e-commerce leaders managing markets across Europe. There are also limited seats and early bird tickets. Early bird tickets are available now. These are sold out in the fall. You can either reach out to your Edge partners or register directly via our website, where it's listed under the events tab. So now, having said that, we're running up against time, so we only have time for a limited amount of questions, a ton of questions from the audience. So we really appreciate your engagement and interest. All participants, again, are on mute for the call. So continue to submit your questions through the Q&A panel tool in GoToWebinar. I can take the first question. Yes, absolutely. All participants will receive the webcast recording and presentation from us. And if you'd like to learn more about how Edge can help your organization achieve success in a changing and dynamic retail landscape, you can contact us at info@ascentialedge.com. So yeah, let's get right to the questions. Rob, a question that just came in for you. How can I achieve a stronger brand presence and reduce costs at the same time?
The $1 million question. So I mean, that's the question from so many of our clients, from just people we see at events and meet every day. That there is no long and short to that, but obviously technology providers, and I don't want to do a shameless plug on Edge here, but technology in not just our sector, but in many sectors, is allowing people to boost productivity whilst reducing resource. And surely there are things that our suite can offer that do allow our clients to dramatically reduce spend whilst bolstering their content online through automation, through tracking in real time, and various other methodologies.
Great, thanks, Rob. Rich, a couple questions have just come in for you centering around mobile. One of the questions is, how are you testing mobile optimized images?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we're going through at the moment, actually. I think that's always kind of central to all of the development work we do on the digital shelf, and where possible, we'll measure absolutely every change that we make, particularly around the imagery piece, because what we're finding is that more and more suppliers, as I talked earlier, we're kind of all pushing each other, which is fantastic, and really enhancing the capability. But I think the retailers are getting to a point now where they're starting to hear conflicting direction on what those mobile hero images look like. So without rigor in the testing, without consumer insight behind it, I think both from a quant and a qual point of view, then some retailers will start to refuse the mobile optimized images that you push out to them through whatever provider you use. So like I just referred to there, we do both quant and qual. We have a shopper panel from a qual point of view, where we do put the images in front of them and ask if they can identify things like brand, pack size, etc. But from a quant point of view, there's a great partner in the UK that we use for some A/B testing, which is My Supermarket. What I like about My Supermarket is they're quite agile in the testing capabilities, and it is a live shopping environment as well. So it really does give you some true shopper feedback, and due to the nature of that business, you can actually cut that feedback by retailer as well, which just really reinforces, I guess, your case study and your suggested way forward with how you want your mobile imagery to appear on site.
Great, thanks, Rich. A number of questions are continuing to come in. So again, everybody, thank you for your participation. Rich, another question that just came in for you. How can we win UK grocery retailer support on creating rich content for product pages and convince them that we should be putting our efforts into this, even in the laundry and commodity-based sectors?
Yeah, no, great question. I think really we're probably in a similar place where, as I talked about earlier, we would probably like more branded content on those product pages. And I think the way, I don't know if force is the right way. I think maybe kind of educate and take on the journey is probably a better way of putting it. I think it's back down to shopper. I mean, everything that we do on these platforms, the two key drivers of e-commerce grocery shopping are convenience and speed. So we don't really want to put too much friction through the platforms. So I think with regards to branded content, like I talked about with the example in China, we probably want to do something similar because that's in our DNA. But we need to make sure it's the right thing for the shopper. We need to make sure that it's aiding decisions to build baskets, because building baskets is how the retailers make the operation profitable. So if we can demonstrate that richer branded content on product pages aids conversion, aids dwell time on products, and ultimately aids basket additions, then that's the approach, and that's ultimately the approach that we'll be doing. And the testing environment for us will be on some of our retail partners outside of the UK, where we're able to have much richer branded content. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Rich. Again, we've had a number of questions come in. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we do have for today. So anybody that did ask a question that we were unable to answer live, we will make sure to get back to you directly with our recommended response. So again, want to extend a huge thank you to Richard and Rob for their time, their insights. We hope everybody today found today's session very beneficial. Again, if you would like to learn more about our services and how we can help you navigate and really conquer this e-commerce journey, please reach out to us directly at info@ascentialedge.com, and we'll make sure to get back to you. Again, thank you for everybody's time, and we look forward to being in touch. Have a great rest of your day.